The Champions League final is officially set, and we have PSG against Arsenal. A lot of people thought that Bayern Munich might make it to this stage. A lot of people thought that Atletico Madrid might make it to this stage, but the final will be between PSG and Arsenal. And to be honest, I don't know what to expect. Honestly, I don't know what to expect. Now, these are very early preview and predictions, as the final isn't for another 3 weeks or so. So this is very, very early. But in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my early Champions League final preview and predictions. We're going to be looking at the semi-final matchups between PSG and Bayern Munich and Arsenal and Atletico Madrid. We're going to be looking at last season where these two teams did face up against each other in the 2025 Champions League semi-final. And obviously, we're going to give some slight early predictions to this final match. Now, we're going to start off with the two fixtures between PSG and Bayern Munich because we had one game that was absolutely incredible, 5-4, and then we had this game 1-1. But I feel like both of these games did show us a very different story. Now let's start off with the first semifinal game, which finished 5-4. This game was all out attack. This game was 100% attack. We saw goals from Kvaratskhelia, goals from Dembele. We saw on Bayern Munich goals from Kane, Olise, Upamecano, Luis Diaz. We saw a header from Joao Neves, the shortest player on the pitch. This game had literally everything. This was the most insane semifinal matchup we've ever seen in the semifinals. The amount of shots, the amount of clinical finishing ability on display, the amount of just craziness that happened, the little that we saw in terms of defense from both teams. This game was probably the craziest semifinal game we've ever seen. But this showed us how good PSG are on the attack, how clinical they can be on the attack. And that has been one criticism I've had for PSG even over recent years, is their lack of clinical finishing capability. And we saw that against some teams, against Chelsea, against Liverpool, where in some games they had 15, 20, 25 shots, yet they struggled to even score 2 goals. But in this game against Bayern Munich, it was the complete opposite. They had 5 shots on target and they scored 5 goals. That is the definition of clinical finishing capabilities. But then we need to fast forward to the second leg game, where that game ended in a 1-1 draw. It was pretty much a 1-0 win because that last goal from Harry Kane was pretty much a consolation goal. But in this game, I don't think PSG intended this game to go this way. I don't think Luis Enrique intended this game to go the way it did. But obviously, Dembele getting that goal in the 3rd minute, a great run by Kvaratskhelia, who in my opinion was definitely the man of the match, a great pass into the box to Dembele, and a great finish by Dembele. But first of all, that was a big mistake on the Bayern Munich defense. Upamecano was way out of position, Leimer was way up the pitch, and Kvaratskhelia was pretty much on a one-on-one with Jonathan Tah, who can barely even run. But I feel like after PSG scored this goal, they really changed the way they played. They didn't play all-out attack like they did in that first leg game. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people weren't expecting. I know me, my chat, and my live stream, after PSG scored that first goal in 3 minutes, we expected this game to have another 5 goals, another 6 goals, 7 goals. But it turns out that PSG played more reserved, they played more defensively, and they actually didn't have too many great opportunities. Obviously, they still had opportunities because on the counterattack, PSG are the most deadly team in the world. With the pace they have, with the skillful wingers that they have, and with the fact that they don't play with a proper number 9, they have players who can shift all across the front 3. And with that being said, on the counterattack, PSG are the most deadly team in the world. But they were much more reserved in this game, especially in the second half. It was mostly Bayern Munich. Now, yes, PSG still had the odd chance. We saw a great chance from Doué. We saw a great chance fall to Kvaratskhelia because, like I said, on the counterattack, they are the most deadly team in the world. But this showed us a different side of PSG, a side of PSG that we haven't seen that much in this Champions League, and that is their defensive side. And their defense was very good in this game. Players like Pacho, players like Mendes had a very good game, even though he probably should have been sent off, still had a very good game. Now, I will say, Zaire Emery, in my opinion, he's not good enough to play this right back position. He's not good enough to cover for Hakimi. Hakimi needs to be back and fit for this Arsenal game for PSG to have their best squad and the best chance to win. But with that being said, they were very good defensively in this game. But also Bayern Munich on the attack, they weren't taking their chances. They were missing the net in almost every single shot. Luis Diaz, Olise, Musiala had some great chances fall to all of them, but they just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. So as good as PSG were defensively, Bayern Munich on the attack also weren't as good as they were in that first leg game. But moving on to the other semifinal matchup, we had Arsenal against Atletico Madrid. And honestly, these games were completely trash. I'm sorry to say it, but Arsenal against Atletico Madrid was horrible. The first leg, the second leg, they were just boring. Now, to be fair, in the first leg, funnily enough, we actually saw more total shots in this game than in the PSG versus Bayern game. We saw almost 30 total shots in this game. So they had more shots in this game, but they only scored 1 goal each. And that shows us that both of these teams are not clinical enough in the attack. It's the exact opposite that we saw in the PSG versus Bayern game, where we saw so much clinical finishing capability, so much great fluidity in the attack, so many great chances in the attack. In this game, they had good chances, both Atletico Madrid and Arsenal, but they just couldn't put them away. Look at all these shots to Arsenal and to Atletico Madrid. They had loads and loads of shots, but both goals ended up coming through penalties, and in open play, both teams struggled. Lookman struggled, Simeone struggled, Griezmann struggled on Atletico Madrid. And for Arsenal, Gyökeres struggled, Eze struggled, Madueke struggled, Martinelli struggled. So this shows us that both of these teams were pretty much the opposite of PSG versus Bayern Munich. But I think in the second leg game is where Arsenal's quality really shone through. Obviously, they had the home advantage at the Emirates, and in my opinion, they were definitely the better team against Atletico Madrid. Now, I thought Atletico Madrid were very disappointing in this game. I don't think they came to play. They didn't really do much on the attack at all. I can't remember any real high quality chances that they had. And for a team who went down in the 44th minute to a goal from Bukayo Saka, they had that whole second half where they needed to come back, and I just didn't think they played to the best of their abilities. Now, if you look at Arsenal, once again, they were the better team. They had a lot of shots, but once again, we see that lack in finishing ability. If we remember Gyökeres' chance, which was right here, this should have been put away. This should have been the second goal of the night, but he blazed it wide open over the net, wide, like 10 feet high over the net. Horrible finishing capability. And it wasn't only Gyökeres. Obviously, Saka got the goal, but even him, even Eze, I don't think they have good enough and clinical enough finishing ability. Now, on the other hand, if you look at their defense, they have an incredible defense. Calafiori, to be fair, didn't have the best game. That's why I got subbed off early. But Gabriel, Saliba, Ben White in this game was very good. David Raya, in my opinion, has been Arsenal's most important player in this Champions League. And obviously, Declan Rice, we all know he's one of the best defensive midfielders in the world. So heading back into the final, obviously, we talked about Arsenal in the semifinals and we talked about PSG. Where will this game be won? For me, the team that is more clinical in the attack will win this game. And that's why I struggle to see how Arsenal will win, because we've seen PSG be one of the most clinical teams in the world. When Arsenal, on the other hand, we've seen them be very wasteful in the attack a lot this season. Players like Gyökeres, players like Eze, players like Madueke especially, Martinelli especially. We've seen a lot of their players, a lot of their attackers be very, very wasteful in the attack. And for me, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about PSG are going to smoke Arsenal 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think this game is going to have very little high quality chances. I feel like this is a game where you're going to need to be clinical to score goals. And why is that? That's due to Arsenal's defense. Obviously, like I already mentioned, Arsenal have arguably the best defense in the world. And PSG against Bayern Munich, we're coming up against a team in Bayern Munich who conceded 3 goals against Mainz in the Bundesliga a few games ago, 3 goals against Heidenheim, who are last place in the Bundesliga a few games ago, 2 goals against Stuttgart. So obviously they're going to concede multiple goals against PSG, the best team in the world. But Arsenal are not like Bayern Munich. Arsenal's priority in their team is the defense. And with that being said, I do think it will be very, very tough for PSG to catch Arsenal out on the counterattack like they do against most other teams they play against, like they did against Chelsea, like they did against Liverpool, like they did against Bayern Munich. I don't think they're going to be able to do that against Arsenal. Now, an area of PSG's team that I think they can beat Arsenal is in the midfield. And for me, that's a very, very important area for PSG in these games against Arsenal, with players like Fabian Ruiz, players like Vitinha, obviously players like João Neves, and even players like Zaire Emery. players like Mayulu. They're more attacking players. I feel like this, for PSG, their midfield is the area where they can beat Arsenal. I think in the attack, yes, they have a great attack, but I think with Arsenal's great defense, it really counteracts PSG's attack. But the one area where I think PSG can do a lot of damage to Arsenal is in that midfield. Now, yes, players like Declan Rice are incredible. And even whoever's playing beside him, whether that's Zubamendi, Lewis Skelly, whoever it is, they have a good midfield. But with the technical ability that PSG's midfield have, with the fact that they run 90 minutes every single game, players like Vitinha, João Neves, these players run for the whole entire game. I think they will outwork Arsenal's midfield, and that's the area of the pitch that I think PSG can possibly exploit Arsenal. Now, I think another very important area of the pitch for PSG is their wingbacks, players like Hakimi, players like Nuno Mendes. Obviously, we saw Hakimi being missed in that last game against Bayern Munich, and it was a big miss, because Zaire Emery, I don't think, was as good. Obviously, he didn't provide those overlapping runs like Hakimi does. And against Luis Diaz, we saw him get cooked a lot of the time. So I do think their wing backs will be very, very important to prevent players like Saka, players like Trossard, players like Madueke for creating opportunities for Gyökeres. Now, I will say, in Arsenal's last game against Atletico Madrid, I think Gyökeres was very, very good. In that game, yes, he didn't have the best rating. Yes, he didn't score a goal. And FootMob only gave him a 5.7 as the worst player on Arsenal's team. But in my opinion, he actually did a lot of good. The way he could hold up play using his body, the way he could control the ball, the way he was finding space, the way he was dribbling into space. I don't think the Atletico Madrid defenders, especially Le Normand, he could not control Gyökeres. Gyökeres was getting by him almost every single time. So I don't think this low rating is warranted. I think he was much better than that. And I do think in this game against PSG, he could be a very, very important player for Arsenal. Now, where would be Arsenal's best chance to score in this game? For me, it's going to be off set pieces. I think PSG, yes, they have some tall players, but majority of their team are a little bit on the shorter side. So I think Arsenal can possibly take advantage of that. And that's why I don't think PSG will keep a clean sheet in this game. I do think Arsenal will score a goal in this final, but I think PSG have more scoring outlets than Arsenal do. And also, I think the fact that this game is being played in Hungary, obviously in the Puskás Arena, a neutral venue, I actually think that favors PSG over Arsenal, because we've seen Arsenal play in neutral venues in recent finals. The most recent one was in the EFL Cup against Man City, and they got smoked. They got absolutely destroyed. And I do think having the home advantage at the Emirates has been a big advantage for Arsenal in this Champions League. But if you look at PSG, playing at the Parc des Princes or playing away from home, they perform everywhere. They scored multiple goals against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. They scored multiple goals against Liverpool at Anfield. They scored against Bayern Munich at the Allianz Arena. They've scored in so many, almost all of their away fixtures. And that shows you that PSG aren't shy of playing away from home. Away from home, they can still perform to the best of their abilities. Now, I'm going to quickly look at the games from last year where both of these teams did come up against each other in the semifinals. Obviously, in the game at the Emirates, PSG won 1-0. This game was very low scoring. It was very 50-50. Both teams were limited to their chances, but PSG did score a very early goal from Dembele in the 4th minute, and they kept that 1-0 lead for the rest of the game. Now, in the next game at the Parc des Princes, I will say Arsenal were much better. They were much better on the attack, and PSG weren't as defensively resolute as they were in the first game. It was much more of a shooting contest in that second game. But obviously, PSG got the 2 goals. Arsenal then got a goal back from Saka, but it wasn't enough. PSG win 3-1 on aggregate. Now, I do think there is some prevalence from those 2 games to this game because, yes, obviously this is a new year, but PSG still have relatively the same squad. Other than Donnarumma, they pretty much have the exact same squad, where Arsenal have had some new additions and they have added some new players to their starting 11, most notably Gyökeres, Zubamendi, and also Eze. But I still think that those games from last year may play a part in this year's game, and they may tell us how this game may go. And like I already mentioned, when they're playing at the Emirates last year, it was much more defensive. But when they're playing at the Parc des Princes, it was much more attack and less about the defense. And I do feel like this game at the Puskás Arena will be more in the attack. There will be opportunities. There will be spaces for Arsenal to beat PSG, but there will also be chances for PSG to beat Arsenal. Now, in terms of the final score, it's a little bit too early to predict that. The final is not for another 3 weeks, and it would be impossible to predict the final score, especially depends on how Arsenal perform for the rest of the Premier League, how PSG perform for the rest of the Liga. That could definitely tell us a better story of how this final might go. So obviously stay tuned for my final predictions that will be released about 5 days before the final match. But as for my early predictions, I do think PSG are the better team, and I do think PSG could possibly win their second Champions League in a row, but it will not be a blowout. It will be very, very close, and I don't think they will keep a clean sheet. I think Arsenal will score, but I think PSG will score more. But that's the end of this video. That was just an early preview and predictions to the Champions League final between PSG and Arsenal, where I do think that PSG will be able to win, but I don't think it will be as much of a blowout as a lot of people are expecting. As always, remember to let me know your early predictions in the comments down below. Do you think Arsenal are the favorite, or do you think PSG are the favorite? Remember to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you've been enjoying all the content and you're excited for all the World Cup content coming. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.